You good? Kyungnae. Yes, one of the most basic concepts in Taekwondo is the stance. It's essential to every movement because you're always in a stance. Whether you're punching, whether you're kicking, your body is always in a stance. So here are some of the most important stances for Taekwondo. The first one is walking stance. On a walking stance, you want your front leg bent, back leg straight. You can imagine you're standing on a rectangular mat. You've got one leg up in one corner and the other foot in the opposite corner. So this should be a very strong stance. If somebody pushes you to the side, you won't be able to be moved that much because you've got a good strong stance, back leg straight, front leg's bent. Then when you switch, same thing, front leg is bent, about 90 degrees, well not quite 90 degrees, so that you can just about not see your toes over your knee. So if you look straight down toward your foot, you shouldn't be able to see your toes. So from the side, that looks like this. This is a strong walking stance, like this. And you always want your hands up for your stance. So your body is facing straight forward, you're not tilted too much. Body's facing straight forward, not like this, this. You've got your arms out in front of you, ready to defend yourself. So this is used for things like kicks. It's probably one of the more used when doing techniques outside of fighting. So next is the sitting stance. The sitting stance is like this. You have your feet 2 shoulder widths apart. So you've got your toes both facing forward, feet are 2 shoulder width apart, so it's a wide stance, and you want your knees bent. So you want to come down just about as far as you can. This is easy to practice by doing wall sits or even just working on the stance. So this is used mostly for things like punches or hand techniques. So this is a strong sitting stance. And there's only one type of sitting stance. It doesn't matter which foot is forward because neither foot is forward. So this is the one equal sitting stance. So here's what that looks like from the side. And lastly, it's a little bit more advanced. So if you're a beginner student, don't worry about this one quite yet. Is the L stance or back stance. So on the L stance, your feet make the shape of an L. This knee is bent. Most of your weight is on this leg, and there's a little bit less of your weight on this leg, so you should be able to lift it up without swaying too much. Both knees are bent, but most of your weight is on the back. So here's what that looks like forward. So your heels are just about in line, straight. You can have this front leg out just a little bit to help you balance. Holding back. This is used for retreating techniques. If I want to block and step back, I might find myself in an L stance. It's also used in the forms. So it's an L stance. So there are lots of different names for these stances depending on which style you're in. The walking stance is also called the archer stance, the bow stance, the forward stance, the front stance. So lots of different names. The sitting stance is also called the horse stance because it looks like you're riding a horse. And the L stance is also called the back stance, the reverse stance. So you might hear all of those names come up. Just know which ones they refer to. And lastly, there's a stance that isn't quite one of the Taekwondo stances, but it's essential for all of the fighting, and we use it every time we spar. That's the fighting stance. So this isn't one of the traditional stances. The traditional stances are all very showy, they're deep stances, but they're not practical for actual fighting. So the fighting stance is wherever you're comfortable. If you just jump and let your feet come down, that should be about where your body is facing about 90 or about 45 degrees. It's tilted. You've got both knees bent, but your weight is just about equally distributed. You've got your hands up, like in most of the stances. So you're ready to hit with any part of your body. So that's a fighting stance. From the side it looks like this. So once again, you don't want it to be too wide. You don't want it to be too narrow because then you can't really reach with this foot. So you want a nice medium in between, body tilted about 45 degrees. And that's the fighting stance. So those are the main stances that we use in Tae Kwon Do. There are a few others that aren't entirely used that much. So in between techniques, we sometimes have the cat stance, which is up here. So say if you're coming forward and blocking, cat stance block, cat stance, see I'm bringing my whole body up. This foot is off the ground and block. So you might use that. There's also natural stance, which is just standing ready. There are also the command stances. So there's Joon stance. That's important. Every time your instructor says Joon, you get ready. You've got both knees bent a little bit, both arms bent a little bit. So you're ready for anything, just like in the fighting stance. And there's also Paro stance, which is the same stance. That means you're coming back, you're returning. So you can come from any technique into this stance and get ready to bow. So those are the main important stances in Tae Kwon Do. Make sure you learn those well, get used to them because they aren't going away ever. You will always need to use stances because every technique has a stance part of it. Cheerio! 경례!